Did you know that Maseru, Lesotho's capital city, is ranked in the top 20% of least expensive cities in the world? But here's the twist. That doesn't tell the whole story. Today, we're diving into the real cost of living in Maseru, breaking down everything from grocery prices to housing costs, and revealing why being inexpensive doesn't always mean affordable.
And it's fascinating because while Maseru ranks 7,431st out of 94 cities globally in terms of cost of living, the reality on the ground is much more complex.
Let's start with the basics. What does it actually cost to live in Maseru?
Well, according to recent data, the average cost of living for a single person in Maseru is about $650 per month, including rent. For a family of 4, that number jumps to around $1,500.
Those numbers seem relatively low compared to global standards.
They do, but here's where it gets interesting. The median after-tax salary in Maseru is only $751 per month, which barely covers living expenses for 1.2 months.
Wait, so people are essentially living paycheck to paycheck?
Exactly. And this is where we see the stark reality. Nearly 4 in 10 people in Lesotho live in extreme poverty on less than $2.15 per day.
Let's break down some specific costs. What about housing?
A one-bedroom apartment in the city centre costs around $131 per month, while in cheaper areas it's about $66. For a 3-bedroom apartment, you're looking at $230 in the centre and $117 in cheaper areas.
And utilities?
Basic utilities for a family, including electricity, heating, water and garbage, run about $192 per month. Internet service with 50 megabytes per second or higher costs around $33 monthly.
You know what's interesting? I noticed something about water projects in the economy.
Ah, yes, the Lesotho Highlands Water Project. It's actually been a significant boost to the economy, with water royalties creating current account and fiscal surpluses in 2024.
Let's talk about food costs. What's a typical grocery bill look like?
A litre of milk costs about $1.02. A dozen eggs are $1.63, and a kilogram of chicken breast is around $6. Basic staples like rice cost about $1.77 per kilogram.
And what about eating out?
A meal at an inexpensive restaurant costs about $11.16, while a 3-course dinner for 2 at a mid-range restaurant runs around $25.
Those prices seem reasonable by global standards, but I imagine it's different for locals.
Exactly. This is where we see a huge disparity between expat and local experiences. What seems inexpensive to foreigners can be quite challenging for local residents.
Let's talk about transportation. How do people get around?
Public transport is relatively affordable. A one-way ticket costs about $0.75, and a monthly pass is around $29.7. Gas prices are about $1.06 per litre.
And what about inflation? How's that affecting these costs?
Recent data shows an inflation rate of 4.7% as of September 2025, up from 4.6% in August. This was mainly driven by higher prices for housing and utilities.
You know what's fascinating? I read that many Basotho actually leave the country for work.
Yes, and this leads to a significant economic factor. Remittances from these workers account for over 20% of Lesotho's GDP annually.
That's a huge percentage. How does this impact the local economy?
It creates an interesting dynamic where many families rely on money from relatives working abroad to maintain their standard of living in Maseru.
What about economic growth prospects? Any positive signs?
According to the Central Bank of Lesotho, growth is forecast at 1.1% in 2025, slowing to 0.9% in 2026, before picking up to 1.4% in 2027.
Those aren't exactly inspiring numbers.
No, they're not. But there are some potential catalysts for change. The World Bank suggests that promoting private sector-led growth and encouraging investments in export industries could create more jobs.
Let's circle back to daily living costs. What about things like entertainment and leisure?
A monthly fitness club membership costs about $538, and entertainment options are limited but generally affordable. A domestic beer at a pub costs around $1.7.
That fitness club membership seems surprisingly expensive relative to other costs.
It is, and it's a good example of how some services, particularly those catering to expats or middle-class residents, can be disproportionately expensive.
What about healthcare costs?
Healthcare costs are relatively low compared to developed countries, but access to quality healthcare can be limited, which is why many residents with means often seek treatment in neighboring South Africa.
So it sounds like there's really two different Maserus, one for expats and one for locals.
Exactly. While an expat might find Maseru incredibly affordable, a local family earning the median salary faces significant financial challenges.
Let's talk about housing trends. Are prices stable?
Housing costs have been rising with inflation, but what's more concerning is the utility costs. They've been increasing faster than general inflation.
And what about food inflation specifically?
Food inflation has been running at about 6.2%, which is particularly challenging given that food makes up a large portion of household expenses for most families.
That must be especially hard on lower income families.
Absolutely. When you consider that food and non-alcoholic beverages make up about 32.6% of the consumer price index, any increase in food prices has a significant impact on household budgets.
What about saving? Is it possible for the average person in Maseru to put money aside?
With the median salary just barely covering monthly expenses, saving is extremely challenging for most residents. This is why many rely on remittances from family members working abroad.
Speaking of work, what's the job market like?
The job market is quite challenging, which is why we see so many people leaving to work abroad. Limited local opportunities are a major factor in the high emigration rate.
It's interesting how being one of the least expensive cities globally doesn't necessarily translate to being affordable for residents.
That's the key paradox of Maseru's economy. While prices seem low by international standards, they're still challenging for many locals given the income levels.
Are there any positive economic developments on the horizon?
The second phase of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project is expected to drive some economic activity, and there's a push for public sector reforms to improve efficiency.
But it sounds like significant challenges remain.
Yes, particularly in terms of job creation and economic diversification. The World Bank emphasizes the need for private sector-led growth to create more employment opportunities.
Let's wrap this up. What's the key takeaway about the cost of living in Maseru?
The key takeaway is that while Maseru appears inexpensive by global standards, the real challenge lies in the gap between local incomes and living costs. It's a city where statistics don't tell the full story.
And this really highlights the importance of looking beyond simple rankings and numbers.
Exactly. Understanding the cost of living in Maseru requires considering both the absolute prices and the local economic context.